Committal to select committee. That speaks for itself. That speaks for itself. And speaks loudly to the fact that the opposition really is not interested in meaningful examination of this bill. They are interested in taking Guyana to the precipice. They have no difficulty inflicting, as I described it in the House today, economic sabotage in our country. Right now, members of the private sector will tell you that their international business transactions are affected. The Bankers Association have said in a formal, written, paid advertisement, as has the Insurance Association, as has the Private Sector Commission, that their businesses are being affected. But this opposition refuses to listen to such large stakeholder groups, almost wants to make merry and mirth and laughter out of a grave matter, refusing to recognize the seriousness and gravity of the situation confronting us. A CFATF plenary is being convened in less than 2 weeks. The Honorable Attorney General will be leading Guyana's delegation to that meeting. I believe it's on the 18th of November. CFATF said on the 29th of May of this year, Guyana will, not might, not is likely to, Guyana will face sanctions if this legislation is not enacted by November. And this opposition is still willing, the APNU and the AFC acting in cahoots with each other, still willing to trifle, to gamble, to gamble with the economic fortunes of our country, economic well-being of our country. So I believe that it would be fair to say that today was a display of the one-seat majority at its most irresponsible. At its most irresponsible, displaying callous disregard, arguing against Mr. Greenidge and Mr. Ramjatan, arguing against a private sector petition being laid before this National Assembly. What harm could derive from the voice of the private sector being heard in this assembly? What harm, what peril were they seeking to avoid by seeking to muzzle the private sector and seeking to refuse the private sector commission from reaching the halls of this National Assembly and from being entered into the parliamentary record? What peril were they seeking to avoid? In fact, the dismissal of the PSC petition, the callous disregard for the consequences to the private sector, to business in Guyana, by non-passage of this bill, really point to an alarming lack of concern, disinterest, disregard for the private sector on the part of the opposition. And one cannot help reminiscing on the fact that it is indeed Mr. Greenidge who presided as finance minister over the decimation of the Guyanese economy 30 years ago. And it is Mr. Greenidge who once again is leading the charge against the private sector in Guyana today and against the economy of Guyana today. One cannot help taking note of this fact. And so, ladies and gentlemen, as we contemplate the way forward, as we prepare for the next, reflect on what the implications and next steps might be, I believe that the Guyanese people need to be sensitized to the fact that today is indeed a dark day in parliamentary business and in the parliamentary life of our country. Thank you very much. I invite the Attorney General to our Bishop.
Ladies and gentlemen of the media, I am of the firm view that the combined opposition would have tonight dissed the people of Guyana. And I think that's what the young people say now, show utter disrespect for the people of Guyana. They have basically said, I don't care a damn. I don't care how you suffer. I don't care what are the consequences. I don't care what you say. I am here, and we're going to do what we want. To act without the necessary information, you can plead ignorance. But tonight in the National Assembly, even while the necessary information was being passed on through our speakers, attempts were being made to silence speakers on the government side so that the public would not know the facts. What are the facts? Right in this same room was where the Parliamentary Special Select Committee met. I replaced the Honorable Clement Rowe as a member of this committee, and I think some of the last 9 meetings I participated, if I'm not correct. Whenever the opposition showed up, they wasted time seeking to divert from the main business of the day, had to leave by a certain time, found excuses why they should not come back. And like I said on the floor of this House, it was always the plan of the opposition to kill this bill. But they wanted to ensure that they create an environment where they could blame the government or blame someone else apart from themselves from killing this bill. One cannot but ask the question, whose interests are they protecting? When you're elected as a member of the National Assembly, you are here to represent the views of people. The people who vote for you. The people who put you there to represent you. I would like Mr. Carl Greenidge and Mr. Ramchatan and the members of the APNU and the AFC to tell the people of Guyana whose interests were they representing tonight when they led the 33 members of the opposition to use their one-seat majority to kill this bill. Whose interests were they representing? It could not have been workers, because the major workers' union says, support the bill. It could not have been the ordinary Guyanese, because in your media houses and all the various columns and the letters and the views on the radio and the television, you are hearing the ordinary people say, we need to have the bill. It could not have been the business class, the formal organized private sector, because the 18 organizations of the formal organized private sector, apart from making statements, individually came together and provided a petition, which is now public knowledge, that they did not even want it to be heard on the floor. So they must be forced to name whose interests are they representing. Every one of us in this room stand a chance to suffer. The church that gets a donation from overseas to conduct its charitable program is now going to suffer. Granny who lives by herself because her son and grandson is overseas and receives a monthly remittance will suffer. The people who shop online to get good deals, the young Guyanese professionals who want to build their livelihood and they want to buy their electronic devices to furnish their homes, they will now suffer. Those of us who use credit cards because we have to travel and go different places to conduct business will suffer. The business sector will suffer. As a matter of fact, the cost of doing business will increase, which will also mean the price of goods and services will increase. My colleague, the Honorable Dr. Ashley Singh, has rightfully coined it economic sabotage. It is my conviction that the opposition will not stop. The opposition will continue. They have now become predictable. Their intent is to make the government look bad at all costs. It doesn't matter who is hurt in the process. It's what was used in the language during the budget debate, collateral damage. This is a serious issue, ladies and gentlemen of the media and Guyanese people by extension, because the job of an opposition is to keep a government in line. It should have been the opposition who was hammering home, get the anti-money laundering and countering of financing of terrorism bill moving. It should have been the opposition who was advocating to get it in place, because you want to hold the government to good standards of good governance and transparency and accountability and ensuring only clean money is in the system. But we have to hold the opposition suspect asking the million-dollar question, whose interests are they protecting? And I don't believe they should escape answering that question. They must be made to answer that question. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. At the beginning of the 10th Parliament, I commenced a series of articles in the Sunday Chronicle, and I titled it The Unruly Horse. In those articles, I attempted to explain the conduct of the opposition in the National Assembly with a view of demonstrating that they were acting in violation of the Constitution, the standing orders, parliamentary practice, the norms of democratic traditions, as well as they were acting inimical to the nation's interest. Well, tonight we have witnessed that that unruly horse has bolted. It has shoved off that burden of national responsibility and that important function of advancing the welfare of the people. A parliament of a country has a responsibility, and parliamentarians, by extension, has a duty at a minimum to their constituents and, by extension, Guyana as a whole. The question has been posed here tonight: in whose interest have the opposition acted tonight? You have a call made by the labor movement that has been rejected. You have a call made by the Rice Producers Association that has been rejected. You have a call made by the entire private sector, comprising of 18 or 17 constituent organizations spanning the entire spectrum of commercial Guyana, beginning from the mining sector, the fisheries sector, the aviation sector, the insurance sector, the banking sector, the trade sector. All these people have issued individual statements, as well as an umbrella body. They have issued a petition to this assembly in addition to a statement. You have the diplomatic community representing the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, issuing statements calling upon the National Assembly to pass this bill, and indeed taking the unusual step of meeting the opposition at their respective offices in an effort to enjoin their support. Tonight, when the petition of the private sector was presented, we saw a naked and utterly regrettable attempt by the opposition to shut them out completely, with the resort of raising technical and outrageous arguments that they should not be heard. So you have the entire commercial sector of this country being told that you don't have a voice in the Guyana Parliament. Now, that is worrying, and that must be worrying to our population. You have an opposition shadow minister of finance labeling the umbrella body called the Private Sector Commission, representing almost every conceivable commercial interest, labeling that body a propaganda outfit. You have the leader of the Alliance for Change, well, the deputy leader or vice chairman, Mr. Moses Nagamotu, shouting aloud for all of you to hear
that the private sector does not have a vote in the National Assembly. These are messages that have a dictatorial and authoritarian underpinning. And why is it even more worrying? It is more worrying because these are the people, at the end of the day, unfortunately, who are the alternative government of this country. Tonight, not a single sensible argument has been advanced for their non-support. Every veiled attempt that they made to have this bill recommitted to the select committee was unmasked by the speakers on the government side. Because we asked them frontally, if we are going to commit the bill to the select committee, having regard to the time frames by which we are bound, are you going to give us some undertaking that, one, there will be support to the bill, and secondly, that the work of the committee will be expedited in a manner which will enable us to meet the fixed deadlines? And not a single utterance of commitment has come. So the bluff of the opposition has been unmasked, has been called on, and they have been unable to deliver. So the point I am making is that you have a parliament that no longer is representing that which is good for any cross-section of Guyanese people. Bishop Edghill and Dr. Singh explained about the consequences that will flow. The aircraft industry in its statement explained that it is almost wholly dependent upon spares and supplies that have to be imported, and have to be imported expeditiously. And this bill, these sanctions, if they are imposed, if the bill is not passed, would put certain constraints that would not enable them to get their supplies that they need to run the aircraft industry, the aviation industry in Guyana. So the only other interest, therefore, that one is forced to conclude that the opposition is representing is the interest of money launderers and criminals. If you have rejected the entire country in their appeals, you have not uttered a single sensible reason for your non-support, the inference that is most compelling for one to draw is that the opposition seem to be supporting money launderers and are opposed to the government taking the requisite steps to strengthen our legal system to enable us to combat terrorism and money launderers. That's the only sensible conclusion that one can draw. I have said before that in the war against crime, there are but only two sides. You either stand on the side of the law and the law-abiding, or you stand on the side of crime and the criminals. And I have given repeated examples historically of where the opposition has repeatedly stood on this divide. I gave the example of the firearms bill. Where did they stand? They rejected the firearms bill. Where did they stand when we brought the reforms to the security sector? They rejected those reforms. Where do they stand when we announce that we are going to form a SWAT team in this country? They rejected it in their criticisms in the press even before it was established. Where do they stand tonight? Have they stood on the side of the law? No, they rejected the law. They have stood again on the side of criminals, of terrorists, and of money launderers. And these are the people, unfortunately, that are competing for governmental power in this country. Now, the one single consideration that I want to put to the ordinary Guyanese out there, if so much destruction is done by these people when they are in the opposition, just imagine for one moment what they will do if they ever hold the reins of government again. Tonight we have seen them drive another nail in the coffin of Guyana. And from all indications, they will continue to harm our country in every possible way and every opportunity that they get to do so. Thank you.
Yeah, any question?
Minister Michael Young, the Evening News. You said that you, thank you. Michael Young, the Evening News. It's clear that the opposition would have voted down the legislation from all they said and all the signs that they gave. Now, I have two questions. First of all, what is the way forward? Can the bill, with the amendments, be tabled in any form, fashion again in the National Assembly, either by the government or the opposition side? And secondly, could you say what is the way forward too with respect to the delegation that will be leaving Guyana shortly to visit the officials at CFTF?
Well, let me say that ordinarily a bill can't be brought back to the House in the same session of the National Assembly, of the life of the Parliament, addressing a matter that was previously addressed in so substantial a form. I believe this is governed by the standing orders, and I believe there is some latitude for the standing orders to be suspended. So I rather suspect that ways can be found to bring the legislation back to the National Assembly, but for that to happen, the opposition would have to give a clear signal of a change of heart. Bearing in mind, of course, that there's a very strict timeline upon us. We will participate in the CFATF plenary. Like I said, Minister Nandalal will be leading that delegation. And it is our intention, no doubt, to present Guyana's case, including the several actions that we've taken in relation to non-legislative recommendations that were made, and also apprise the plenary of the efforts that we made as a government to get the legislation passed. Whether that will prove convincing to the CFATF plenary or not remains to be seen. One rather suspects that it will not. But we will continue, as we've always done, make the best effort to present the case for Guyana and to outline the efforts that we've made.
Newmark's Capital News. Bishop Edgell, for Granny and for myself who receive remittances sometimes, could you explain to me how it is that my remittances would be affected?
Because all transactions, financial transactions, whether going out or coming in, would have to stand a higher level of scrutiny because of Guyana's non-compliance as it relates to the CFATF recommendations. There'll be lots more questions to answer. There'll be longer periods of verification. Your money coming through Western Union, you would have to prove serious evidence of who the sender is, the connections, who they are connected to ensure that you're not a front for a person who's laundering money or financing a terrorist activity. Once we had complied with these recommendations, and there were standards set in the financial architecture of the country, the banking sector, the money transfer sector, and we were in compliance, we would have been deemed compliant. So the level of scrutiny and that we will now come under would not have existed because we would have had the legal and financial architecture to protect in this manner.
So in other words, my money will get here. I will just have to do a lot more paperwork and it will take a longer time.
Well, I can tell you, a gentleman was trying to do a simple financial transaction the other day, and he had to answer 46 questions on the spot, 10 of only which he could have answered immediately. 46. So you make the call.
A remittance question again?
The transfer of money to do a business. Guyanese, if you're going overseas to buy goods, to sell in Guyana, if I'm going to China to to buy containers of stuff for my store if I own the store. I don't have a bank account in China. I have to find a way of getting my money to China, even through a business partner, or I have to remit it to a supplier. That process now becomes cumbersome. You might not even be aware that Citibank has ceased all relationships with the bank that it was partnering with in Guyana. Your credit card or debit card transactions become now cumbersome. It's a whole, you're under the cloud of suspicion. Even the cleanest amongst us, even the purest amongst us will be viewed as a money launderer and the financer of terrorism. You have to prove that you are not before your transaction goes through.
In addition, also, the money transfer agencies as a body in Guyana issued a statement on this matter calling for support. And that statement was also supported by a statement issued by Dr. Gobind Ganga from the central bank. The fundamental fact is that the agencies that will desire to continue to transact business in Guyana will themselves be subject to a higher level of scrutiny in their respective jurisdiction, because they would be transacting business with a presumptive money laundering state. Whether they want to subject themselves to that added burden of monitoring and scrutiny is a question that they will have to answer. Many of them may not want to, and they may exit or simply sever ties with Guyana. Secondly, the increased scrutiny that will now attract their operations will have a cost attached to it. So one, you will take a longer time if the agencies continue to want to transact business in Guyana. It will now be a delayed transaction and it will cost more. And you and the sender will be burdened with an additional set of responsibilities that you don't shoulder now in terms of providing an account and an explanation and a source for every dollar of your money, whether you send it or you receive it. All these added burdens can be avoided. The insurance industry, for example, has explained that they are most likely to be affected, since over 80% of their business depends upon reinsurance with Lloyd's from London, for example. So whenever you take an insurance policy in Guyana, it's a small portion of that transaction that is financed through local funds. A reinsurance is issued to another agency, to another body, external to Guyana. The largest body operating in the world, at least in this part of the world, is Lloyd's in London. And they have already sent a signal that they're not going to burden their operations with this kind of thing. Remember, Guyana is not the only country that would have been blacklisted. Many countries have had before. So you have companies and businesses that are established in the world have a set of procedure and procedure that they will resort to when these eventualities happen. So when Guyana is blacklisted, they know exactly what they have to do. They are going to pull out, or these are the measures that will be implemented.
If I could just a quick follow-up, Gary Ellis pensions. On the money transfer, the remittances, will it be increased scrutiny on every single one from $100 US?
Every single dollar. Guyana will be presumed. Dr. Ashley Singh read the statement that will come out. The statement has already been crafted and it is part of a draft report. That draft report will be adopted as a final report. So the statement that will be issued in respect of Guyana is already there. It says that CFATF will inform their members that Guyana is non-compliant and will invite their members to take such countermeasures to protect their economies and their businesses from the money laundering and terroristic risks that Guyana will expose them to.
So asking for an extension is out of the question.
Well, they have given, this is the end. They have given me 6 months already. They have given Guyana 6 months already. And as when Dr. Singh read that statement, it was very firm and definitive in its language. It says Guyana will, unless, and the unless relates to the production of this bill.
The opposition are saying that from 2009, government knew that the bill was, the act was deficient. Why not address it?
That
since
is
then?
not-
Or what in the year
That is a complete inaccuracy. The process which every country undergoes is a continuing one. Guyana has been evaluated for a long time now, and it will not stop. That is why I made the point in the National Assembly that whatever deficiencies some may feel afflict the bill, the opportunity to correct them will continue to present itself. Because currently the AG Chambers is drafting a set of laws satisfying another set of recommendations which have a different time frame that we have to comply with. So this is not the final and last opportunity ever presented to the Parliament of Guyana to change the bill. And as I said, the matters that they want to change, the model or the structure of the FIU, that has been assessed already in 2010 by the CFATF and approved as satisfying the requirements of CFATF. This thing is an exercise that is driven by CFATF and not by the government. We are simply complying with the minimum of the requirements which are sent to us, because the requirements are quite exorbitant in certain instances. And we are trying, like every other Caribbean country, we are trying to meet minimum standards of what the international obligations expect are in the context of this matter.
If I could just want to separate thing. Knowing fully well the opposition stance on the changes to the procurement laws, the proposed changes that we tabled today, why come with it knowing that it stands a good chance of being voted out?
Let me say that the amendments proposed to the Procurement Act are grounded in principle. There are strong arguments in favor of those amendments. There is good reason why those amendments should be enacted. And we intend to make those arguments in this House, and to make those arguments to the people of Guyana. If the opposition then elects to ignore the merit of those arguments and vote against the amendments, then the people of Guyana will judge them on that basis. But we will not shy away from doing what is right and good for Guyana, simply because we think they will vote against it.
Why not do it when you still had a majority? Because it was the PPP that voted that bill to have the cabinet's role removed. It was left there, and while the majority never attempted to take it out.
Well, I believe this has been explained already in the an explanation of what transpired there has already been placed in the public domain. I recall, for example, the Presidential Advisor on Governance speaking at length about the circumstances that led
On how it
to the
got in, but
insertion.
what I'm saying, why not change it when you have the majority?
And equally, the reasons why it is now is the time that we have brought this amendment to the Parliament. Given the discourse, first of all, our position as it relates to the restoration of the cabinet and objection is not a new position. That position we have spoken of at length. Given the discussions that are being held on the constituting of the Public Procurement Commission, we have made very clear that we will proceed with nominating our members for the Public Procurement Commission on the condition that, or with the expectation that this amendment will be enacted. So I would say that bringing these amendments now is timely. If there are no further questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.